This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. LBC's Election Call.
Right, 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of April, and each week during the election campaign, we're giving you the chance to question a senior politician about the issues that matter to you. We'll be hearing from all the main parties as Britain decides. This morning, we're joined by the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, leader also of the Liberal Democrats. Mr. Clegg, good morning to you. Where are you today?
Good morning. I'm in the northwest. I'm in Salford.
Found a voter again.
So, chasing down every prospective Lib Dem voter is being approached.
Must be wonderful
in every
to have
corner of the country.
Party leader actually knock on the door and introduce himself in this fashion.
It's called the personal touch. It's called the personal touch.
All right, let's get straight to these questions, Mr. Clegg. David is in Enfield, and you're the first through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Morning, David.
Mr. Clegg, my question relates to the child abuse scandal. It's two parts. On the 23rd of February this year, your party, supported by the Conservatives, voted against an amendment to the Serious Crime Bill proposed by Labour MP John Mann to protect police officers from prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. This vote took place at 9:15 in the evening and went unreported at the time. So my first point is, why did you not support this proposal? Then my second question is, according to the local newspapers in Sheffield, between 2001 and 2013, 660 girls, some as young as 12, suffered serious sexual abuse in Sheffield, to which the authorities turned a blind eye. Now, the town has a number of Liberal Democrat councillors, and you're a local MP. Were you aware of what was going on?
So, David, on the latter point, of course, sorry, are you asking, was I aware back in 2001 about the allegations of this very serious and horrific
this was going on,
clearly not. I mean, sorry, of course not. I mean, I'm as shocked as anybody else, not just with that revelation about what was happening in South Yorkshire, Rotherham and Sheffield, or alleged to be happening, but also elsewhere in the country, and that the way in which, with each passing month, the lid appears to be being lifted on a kind of pattern of large-scale abuse, which is unimaginable to any sort of normal person, and seems to be happening in different parts of the country. No, of course I wasn't aware of it, and I, like you, no doubt, David, I want to see the truth come out. I want to see the police now get to the bottom of what happened, and I want to see the perpetrators punished. On the Serious Crime Bill amendment, David, forgive me, as you can imagine, there are lots and lots of amendments which are always sort of put forward to bits of legislation as they pass through Parliament. And in this case, I guess Theresa May would have taken a view, I'm assuming, but I can check for you if you like, I can check with the Home Office, would have taken a view that the protections, at least the way you describe it to me, are sufficient to allow any police officer to come forward. And I would certainly urge not only police officers, but anybody who has any information to come forward and do so without any fear of recrimination or any fear of any impact on their livelihood or their careers. But I can, if you wish, David, try and find out the detail about whether John Mann's amendment really did meet that test or not.
What response from you, David?
I find that unbelievable, because the amendment was very clear, and in fact your MPs voted overwhelmingly with the Conservatives against passing that amendment, which was supported by all the Labour MPs and one or two dissenting Conservative and Liberal Democrat MPs. I find it amazing you're not aware of it.
Well, you shouldn't be that amazed, David, in the sense that it is a very, very important issue. You and I are not going to disagree that we want particularly retired police officers who feel that they have information which can cast more light on these terrible allegations to come forward and do so without any fear of any impact on their livelihood, on their pensions, on their retirement arrangements and so on. And of course, the suggestion that there's any dissent with that, of course, you're sort of only implying that, of course, is not the case. Everybody wants the same thing. I am assuming, but I can only assume, David, I'm just being very open with you, I can only assume that the Home Office judged that John Mann's amendment was either not didn't quite fit the bill, might not have been technically correct, or that there are provisions elsewhere in the bill or even other amendments which met the same objective. But if I may, I will make sure that someone gets, or I get back to you with more details about that particular amendment.
Mr. Clegg, I don't know if you've yet had sight of the front page of The Times, but it is reported that Alison Saunders, the Director of Public Prosecutions, will announce today it would not be in the public interest to put on trial formerly Greville, now Lord Janner of Braunston QC, the former MP for Leicester West, for historical abuse allegations. This is the second time that he would escape charges. He, of course, denies all these allegations. Is it in the public interest not to proceed?
Well, that, as you know, is not a judgment for. It's precisely right that is a judgment for the Crown Prosecution Service and for the DPP.
Seems to be at odds with what Ms. Saunders said last year. They would pursue victims whether it took 30 days or 30 years.
Yes, but the problem you and I have is that we don't know, if I understand it correctly, she hasn't yet made an announcement, and we don't know. No, and if she were to make that announcement, I'm assuming she would explain her reasons, because everybody would be entitled
well, it would appear possibly, sadly, Lord Janner is in poor health.
Well, I'm sorry, I just don't know what the DPP is going to say about this. She is entirely independent. I don't know what reasons she might give if she were to decide that they can't proceed with this case. But in a justice system, in a democratic society, it is quite right that it is not up to the whims and wishes of politicians. It is up to the prosecuting authorities to pursue justice without fear or favour. And just as you've alluded to yourself, I've been impressed with what she said about the need for the long arm of justice to reach across time, across space, to do so, even if it reaches up to the highest reaches of British society and the British establishment. And she has a reputation for doing so fearlessly. So if she were to decide otherwise in this particular case, I'm assuming she will explain why. But we're going to have to wait until we hear that explanation to know more.
Well, we don't have to wait to hear this. In an LBC exclusive in the previous hour, a former undercover Metropolitan Police officer has said he was forced to release 5 men who admitted being part of a paedophile ring with the late Liberal MP Cyril Smith. He's known as John. The officer said the men admitted to being involved with Smith. We've disguised his voice. Here's a little of what he told us.
He was part of shared their interests, and that they had been with him on occasions elsewhere. Certainly that they'd been in establishments where Cyril Smith was there and where that sort of activity was taking place. It was reported back, obviously. Had to report to the senior officers at the time, the senior investigating officer, and I assumed that he then had to report that elsewhere. Very shortly after that, the inquiry was closed.
So they've told you that they've been involved in this?
Yes.
They've told you that they've been involved in this with an MP?
Yes.
Suddenly the whole thing gets shut down?
Yes.
What are you doing within the Liberal Democrat Party to investigate claims regarding the late Liberal MP Cyril Smith?
Well, we will cooperate, of course.
No, but what are you doing within the Liberal Democrat Party itself?
Well, hang on, let me be very clear. The chap, John, you just talked, you just played the excerpt. What is really shocking is he said that he reported it up to his senior officers. He then said, I think he used the phrase, they reported it elsewhere, I guess further up the chain within the police, and that for some reason then the police, someone, somewhere in the chain of command, decided not to pursue the inquiry. So very, very serious questions, of course, need to be asked now about why on earth the police didn't do what they are supposed to do, which is to investigate evidence of crime where that is presented to them, as it clearly was in this case. And if the police didn't do so in the past, they must do so now, and I'm sure they are. And the Liberal Democrats, and indeed anybody else who's got any information, should make that available to the police. And that's what we can. You can't. No organisation can replace the police, and the police must now do the job which clearly wasn't done by the police in the past. I clearly don't know why the police and in what way the police were discouraged from pursuing that inquiry. I've written to all Liberal Democrat MPs and all peers and to tell them to cooperate fully with the police if they're approached by the police.
But why not hold your own inquiry, lastly?
Well, for starters, the allegations about Cyril Smith actually stretch back to a time when he was a Labour politician rather than a Liberal Democrat. Then he was a Liberal politician, a party which then became subsumed into what is now the Liberal Democrats. As I say, what I can do, what I must do, and I have done, is told all peers and MPs, look, if you think you have any information about this, and certainly if the come forward to the police. And of course, if the police ask you for any information,
Yes.
bring that forward. But if it,
Respectfully, you've not answered why not hold your own inquiry?
because there's no. You suggest there might be some treasure trove of documents that the Liberal Democrats hold about the activity of a man who got up to these things apparently before he was even a Liberal, yet alone Liberal Democrat.
But possibly during the time he was a Liberal as well.
Well, but don't you think that the only people who can deliver justice are the police? I mean, I'm sort of surprised sometimes when people say that someone else should deliver. It is for the police to do so, and it is for everybody else to make information available to the police. And that, of course, is what I've said as leader of the Liberal Democrats. Anybody who has any recollection or any information about that era, however many years ago, should make that information available to the police. But I'm not going to sort of somehow elevate a political party to replace the police. Only the police can do that job for us. They clearly didn't do so in the past. We need to know why not, but we now need to make sure that if anybody has any information which is of use to the police, it is provided to them.
We move to other calls. Cara in Covent Garden is through to Nick Clegg. Go ahead, Cara.
Good morning. I was reading the polls, and yesterday the Conservatives were predicted to win 14 marginal constituencies from you in the Southwest. How are you still staying positive?
Oh, because polls like that are just absolute baloney. I think that particular poll, Cara, would you believe it? I mean, honestly, there's bogus science from some of this stuff. It's just extraordinary. That poll, I think, polled the equivalent of 72 people per constituency without even mentioning the MPs' names or the candidates' names. I mean, it's completely...
So you've got no problems in your heartland?
We've got real contests on our hands, which is great. You should have contests. I enjoy campaigning. I much prefer being out campaigning than, I don't know, arguing with George Osborne in an office in Whitehall. But Cara, we will win so many more seats than this endless cottage industry of sort of pessimistic punditry allows for. But in this particular case, since you asked, Cara, that was a poll which, as I say, you ask 70 people out of 60-odd thousand, without even mentioning the names of the people who are actually going to be on the ballot paper. I have this old-fashioned view that if you want to find out or try and guess how people might...
The poll asked 1,000 voters across 14 constituencies. It's not 72 people, it's 1,000 people.
No, they asked across the whole of across the whole of the Southwest, and if you average it out across those 14 seats, it's about 72 people per seat.
But after 5 years in government, don't you think you should be doing a lot better?
Well, I think we're doing very well, Cara, in the areas where people get to hear our side of the story. But if you want us to do even better still, Cara, which I agree, then all you need to do is vote for your local Liberal Democrat candidate.
Cara, thank you. Peter in West Hampstead.
Hello, Nick, or hello, Nix.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Peter.
We're heading for a coalition, no one denies that. Should you not be producing a Lib Dem Tory sub-manifesto and a Lib Dem Labour? No, I'm being deadly serious. I'm here in Hampstead and Kilburn. There's a very good example of a marginal constituency where people need to know that if they vote for
All right, we have to be very... I'm sorry to interrupt here. We cannot get into constituency matters. I know Mr. Clegg is acutely aware of this, so I just have to rein you in there, because if you start talking about acute matters in a particular part, we get into all sorts of trouble. So let's go back. You're still on the line, Peter. Let's go back to the meat of your question. It is a serious question. Deputy Prime Minister, why don't you do, well, if we were with the cons, we'd do this. If we were Lab, we'd do this. Nick Clegg.
Well, first, I agree with you, Peter. We are... certainly, Ed Miliband and David Cameron will tell you somewhat portentously that they're going to be Prime Minister in their own right and they're going to win a majority. But look in their eyes, I tell you, they know in their heart of hearts, if I'm not mixing hearts and eyes, that they're not going to win an outright majority. So you're right, Peter, we're headed towards a coalition. So actually the question is not, are Ed Miliband or David Cameron going to be Prime Minister? One of them clearly will walk into number 10. It's who do you think is going to be alongside them to kind of keep them on the straight and narrow? And I so happen to think that having David Cameron in there with Nigel Farage and at the beck and call of the swivel-eyed brigade on the right wing of the Conservative Party is not a good idea for the country, because they'll cut way beyond what is necessary. Equally, I don't think it's a very good idea to have Ed Miliband dancing to the tune of Alex Salmond and borrowing way beyond what we can afford. So, unsurprisingly, Peter, I think the best thing for the country is to make sure that we continue to anchor the next government in the centre ground. I think that can only be done with Liberal Democrats in Parliament and in government. Or I can't do what you suggest and pre-negotiate how other parties may react depending on a result of an election which hasn't happened yet. Of course I can't. What I can do, and I accept in a sense of sort of implicit challenge in your question, Peter, is set out what the kind of die-in-the-ditch priorities are for the Liberal Democrats. So, like last time, you will remember from if you look at your well-thumbed copy of the Liberal Democrat manifesto in 2010, we put on the front page of our manifesto the policies that we would stick with through thick and thin, as we did, by the way, raising the point at which you pay income tax, putting more money into schools for disadvantaged kids, sorting out the economy, pushing for political reform. And I've done so again just yesterday and said, you'll be able to earn £12,500 without paying any income tax. We'll balance the books for you, but do it fairly. We'll put £8 billion into the NHS and promote mental health. We'll protect sort of cradle to college spending on our nurseries and schools and colleges, and we'll protect the environment. Those are the priorities, much like last time, that we will stick to. And in a sense, how the cookie then crumbles in terms of the other parties and how they might interact with each other is for you and millions of voters to decide, not for me to prejudge at this stage.
Quick response, Peter.
I would still like to see one side of one sheet on sub manifestos. I still would like to still think it's useful.
All right, thank you for that. I go to some emails, Peter. Thank you. Graham in Bushy. Nick Clegg, you said yesterday you'll be the heart of the Conservatives and the brains of Labour. So, are you Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, a munchkin, or the cowardly lion that has no courage? You backed yourself into this, Mr. Clegg.
No.
Now, which are you? Dorothy, a munchkin, or the cowardly lion?
No, well, obviously I am the lion with courage. Look,
I can see the pictures in the Mirror and the Mail and the Sun.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you don't need to give them much invitation. I'm sure you can, and I'm sure they'll be very flattering, as they always are. No, look. By the way, just on courage, I do. Whatever people say about the Lib Dems, and boy, do people say a fair number of things about the Lib Dems, or indeed unfair things about the Lib Dems. I think it was a really courageous, I think it was a plucky, gutsy decision we took 5 years ago to go into coalition. We knew it was going to have an impact on our short-term popularity, but at a time when everyone's so cynical about politics, I think, for once, having had a party that put country before party was a good thing.
All right. We're north of the border. Trevor's in Edinburgh. Go ahead, Trevor.
Hello there. Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Hello, Trevor.
Hello. I'm just phoning up to say I was watching a programme with Willie Rennie, the leader of the Liberal Democrats in Scotland.
Great man.
I'm a great believer that this country's a wagon, and the horses are all the politicians who pull the wagon forwards. And what I would like to see amongst politicians in this country is much, much more cooperation and communication between all the parties, instead of all this bickering and fighting that goes on. Now, Willie Rennie said last night very clearly he would not cooperate with the SNP, and I can understand Willie and other leaders of the parties who are campaigning to try and win in their own right. I mean, the Liberal Democrats would like a majority, so would Labour, so would the Conservatives, so would UKIP and all the rest of them. The thing is, it's not going to happen. It is likely that this will end up with some kind of rainbow coalition. So all you guys in politics, here's my advice, as a man who's over 60. Work together for the good of the country. And if you have to deal with the SNP on an issue-by-issue basis, as Nicola Sturgeon has said very clearly, then so be it if it's for the overall good of the country, because we should not put party politics in front of the well-being of this country, the welfare of the people. That is the most paramount thing. That's all I wanted to say to you, Nick.
All right,
let's get a
response.
response.
Trevor, thanks for the advice. Can I just two responses, if I may, Trevor. Firstly, look, I've got the T-shirt in terms of trying to put party differences aside and putting the country first and cooperating with another party. That's exactly what we've done in coalition over the last 5 years. And what I've discovered is there are some people like you, and I happen to agree with you, Trevor. I basically share your general view, which is that in politics, as in life, sometimes it's a good thing to try and work together, even with people you don't agree with, for the wider whole. But I've also discovered there are lots of other people, and you've seen it from the sort of screaming reaction I've had day in, day out from the right and the left, who hate cooperative politics because they want to turn the clock back to the kind of yaboo, slam dunk sort of politics of old, where you always have one victor and everybody else is vanquished. But I basically agree with you that, of course, we're moving into a politics of greater cooperation. Doesn't mean people can't spell out their differences and disagree forcefully, but nonetheless work for the benefit of the country. On the Scottish nationalists, the only thing where I think they're in a sort of different category is that you said, I think I'm right in saying, Trevor, I scribbled it down, you said to people should work for the overall good of the country. And here's the problem with the Scottish nationalists. The Scottish nationalists don't want to work for the overall good of our whole country because they want to pull our country, as it is, the United Kingdom, apart. And that sets them apart. In the same way that I would not, and Willie Rennie would not advocate putting Nigel Farage in charge of Europe, you can't reasonably ask us to say that we think we should play a role in putting the Scottish nationalists in charge of a country that they want to sort of, pull limb from limb, if you see what I mean. And that's where I think there is a bit of a difference when it comes to that kind of nationalism, where their sole purpose in life is not actually to govern for the overall good of the whole country, as you put it. They actually don't want the whole country to continue as a whole country.
Hazel, on a related theme, has emailed, does Nick Clegg realise how offensive it is he refers to Alex Salmond for the SNP? He should be talking about Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, no, Nicola Sturgeon is not standing in Westminster, and Alex Salmond is. So that's why I'm pick Alex Salmond.
Right.
It's not, that's just a fact. So
Okay.
He wants to go to Westminster. She's not even standing for Westminster.
All right. Carl's in Plaistow. Go ahead, Carl.
Hello, Nick. First, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you? If you're asking me.
The two Nicks.
Yes, we're well.
What's
We're
the
well.
comedian that used to say Nick?
Well, that's right. We moved to your question, though, Carl, if we
designed
can.
it like that.
So,
That's right. I'd like to ask Mr. Clegg if his abysmal prospects and poll results in the coming election, don't you think that this is due to that you sold your soul? And when you sell your soul, you can't buy it back. When you came into power in the Tory coalition, I predicted that you were committing slow suicide, and your termination will finally occur on May the 7th, I think, when you'll be looking for a job. Could I suggest you take up the same path as the equally doomed Alexander and expose the Tories as the party of the bosses, and not as they now pretend the party of working people?
So, well, thanks, Carl, for that charming prognosis of the political situation of the Liberal Democrats. And it's just quite interesting, isn't it? We just had Trevor earlier saying, isn't it time that you politicians just admit that no one's going to win outright and you've got to work together? And you're saying, you're a dastardly fellow because you've worked with others. I mean, you can't win. Look, at the end of the day, Carl, whether you like it or I like it, or whether you do or you don't, the result of the last election, which was delivered not by me, not by Gordon Brown, not by David Cameron, but by millions of people doing that wonderful old-fashioned thing of putting a cross next to candidates' names, came up with a result where no one won an outright majority. And at that point, Carl, we had a simple choice. Did we do what many people might have thought was, but certainly, by the way, would have been easier for the Liberal Democrats just to say, no, we're going to keep our hands clean, we're not going to get our hands dirty, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to court any controversy, we're just going to throw stones from the sidelines and just indulge in continued Yahoo. It'll make us feel better, but we won't actually get anything done. And by the way, if we'd done that, I predict to you, Carl, unemployment would now be much higher, interest rates would be higher, and our country would be poorer. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience. So however much you might want to condemn for what the Liberal Democrats did in May 2010, in your somewhat breathless terms, I'm afraid you're never, ever going to get me to do anything other than be proud of what we did. Because if we hadn't stepped up to the plate, whatever the short-term political consequences, I tell you, more people would be out of work, our country would be poorer, people would be struggling to pay their mortgages, and I certainly would never have wanted to have that on my own conscience.
Steve has emailed, can you ask Nick Clegg, does he feel left out from tonight's debate on the BBC? Yes, good.
Yes, I do. Yeah, quite right, Steve. I find it very odd that the debate tonight doesn't have anybody from one of the parties that's actually been trying to govern our country for the last
It's the opposition leaders debate. I think that's the idea.
Well, I know that's the idea. That's what the broadcasters say. But I mean, I've said to them I would like to participate because it seems to. Well, look, what you're going to get tonight? I mean, I'm going to be at home in Sheffield. I'm not sure I'm going to manage to watch it, but what you're going to get tonight is you're going to get one guy, Ed Miliband, basically saying, the last half decade, the government's been absolutely hopeless, blah, 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 all that breathless stuff, and remaining completely opaque about how he'll actually balance the books. Then you have Nigel Farage saying we should cut and do all sorts of loopy things. And then you've got a whole bunch of other people basically saying, can we please invent money out of thin air, please? And there's no one there actually going to be saying, well, hang on a minute, let's get real about some of the choices that the country faces. And, of course, David Cameron, I know, didn't want to participate in it, but I don't see why I should have been denied the opportunity to put the side of the story of what the coalition government's done, even if he didn't want to.
And the second part of Steve's question, did you like your Newzoid puppet last night? This is this new television show that's a la Spitting Image. Were you able to catch it last night, Mr. Clegg?
I wasn't, Steve, and I suspect it was probably a good thing that I didn't catch it. But I'm sure someone will show it to me before too long.
Lonnie says, and I've got this in front of me if anybody wants to come and read it, you are such a lovely, decent person with amazing personality. It's impossible not to...
Stop, Nick. No. I didn't hear that. Can you say it again?
No,
I didn't hear
I don't know, I can. The terms, I'll risk my electoral credibility. You're a lovely, decent person with amazing... But it's impossible not to like you. Why won't you add the heart to the Tories and just join them? I cannot vote for them as they lack I can't vote Lib Dem because I don't quite
Why
agree
not?
with many of your policies. Just join the Tories, you'll get my vote, says Lonnie.
No, well, Lonnie, thanks for the first bit. But the second bit, no, I'm not a Conservative. I'm just not. I never have been, never will be. I'm in many ways an old-fashioned liberal, and do you know what? Some people say to me, "Oh, you're being so, tough on the Conservatives now. How can you work with them?" Do you know what? What I say in public about them is exactly what I tell them in private. I just don't think the Conservatives have got their priorities right when they want to single out, and I'm sure Lonnie agrees, because Lonnie sounds like a wonderful person, of great judgment and a very perceptive of other people's characters.
Match goes on.
Sorry. I just don't think they've got their priorities right when they say that they want to single out, millions of working age, the working age poor, vulnerable families to be the only part of society to make further sacrifices to balance the books. That's a fundamental decision they've taken, which I really, really disagree with.
Alice is in Canterbury. Go ahead, Alice.
Hi, you talk about being a moderating force between the left and the right. Does that mean you're the only man who can stop David Cameron running the country alone?
Well, I certainly think it's an interesting point, Alice. Where are you calling from, Alice?
Canterbury.
Right.
Canterbury, yeah.
Yeah, so I certainly think, and I know, because Nick Ferrari will counsel me, otherwise I'm not supposed to talk about individual seats, but if you are living in a seat where there's a Liberal Democrat and Conservative battle, then...
It's not me, I assure you, Gov.
No,
it's and you're in a position to change things tonight. Go ahead.
No, I'm not, as it happens. But anyway, but Alice, no, serious point this. I think in those, what they call in the jargon, the battleground seats between Lib Dems and the Conservatives, the whole bunch of them, for instance, in the South West, you're basically right, Alice, because if people vote for the Conservatives, since they're not going to win a majority, I mean, they're going around telling everybody they just need 23 seats and then they'll get a majority. They're not going to get a majority because they're going to lose a bunch of seats to Labour in other parts of the country. So the great risk is if you vote for a Conservative in those seats rather than the Liberal Democrat, you end up with a somewhat hapless Conservative administration who will have to rely on UKIP and the DUP and the sort of swivel-eyed brigade. And I just think that'd be very bad for the country. And that's why if you think we should remain, broadly speaking, in the kind of centre ground and have a coalition of what I've called coalition of conscience rather than a divisive coalition of grievance, then then voting for the Conservatives is about the last thing one should do.
What are the red lines to doing a deal with the Conservatives on May the 8th?
Well, the priorities are the things we put on the front page of the manifesto yesterday. So those are the things that we really will dig our heels in. We will treat the front page of our manifesto, much like we did last time, as something close to a tablet of stone. Fighting to make sure that you don't have to pay any income tax on the first £12,500 that you earn. Fighting to make sure the NHS has got the money that it needs and it prioritises mental health. Fighting to make sure we put money into education from cradle to college, even as the numbers of youngsters being educated increases. Fighting to make sure we protect our environment and balance the books fairly. Those are the things that if you vote for the Liberal Democrats, those are the priorities you will get in the next Parliament.
And you're still proposing electoral reform in your manifesto?
Yes, it is. Yes, you can't have a Lib Dem manifesto without
but 68%, as Graham points out, 68% of the electorate voted no just a couple of years ago. Yeah, so, what does it take for you to realise that no one's interested?
Well, look...
Or have you found someone in Manchester?
Actually, as it happens, you'd be very amused to know the other day, I'm not sure if you see these photos, that I took a break from the campaign trail and went to a Go Ape sort of thing where you go... Do you see this? Where you go on these zip wires?
I'm afraid I did, actually. Yeah.
When we came down from the heights of this treetop fun, someone marched up to me. I thought, oh God, what's he? He looked a bit... He was glowering at me, and I thought, what am I going to get now? And he said, problem with you is you're simply not advocating single transferable vote enough.
It's on the lips of everyone in the country.
Well, it certainly wasn't that gentleman.
Right, just lastly, have you accidentally walked under a ladder or run over a black cat? Your bus the other day, and then in Battersea yesterday, I'm told there was a power cut and your microphone at one point didn't work. Unlucky. Jinxed campaign, Mr. Clegg?
Sabotage. It is sabotage. We're conducting a full anti-sabotage inquiry. We think our opponents are fiddling with our microphone system.
All right.
The truth will be out.
The truth will be out. Look after yourself. Take care up there in the northwest. Mr. Clegg, thank you for appearing on Election Call. And, of course, the prominent members of the big four parties regularly appear here on LBC to take your calls, where the 9:30 news with Lisa Aziz is next.
The Deputy Prime Minister has told LBC very, very serious questions need to be asked following claims police were forced to drop an investigation into child abuse involving the late Sir Cyril Smith.